Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Here on the GSMC Podcast Network, I am your host, Brice Lewis. We have a jam-packed show for you today. A lot of news, a lot of things to talk about around the association. And, we talk about all things basketball here on this podcast. So, we're going to talk about things. We're going to talk about, obviously, Damian Lillard, what some people are calling the screw job in Utah. With referees missing a very blatant call. We're also going to talk about some news and notes around the league, some performances, some updates on teams after the trade deadline, how they're doing. Also, we got Kevin Durant still saying he'll do his burner account. We got teams that are on 15-game winning streaks. We got teams that snap 13-game winning streaks like Minnesota, players and teams looking at certain players. Obviously, we're going to talk about college basketball. We're going to talk about scores, AP poll, all that and more here on the podcast. But we're going to start with that horrible missed call, horrible blown call in Utah between Portland and the Utah Jazz. Obviously, this is a very big deal because Damian Lillard went to the rim in the late fourth quarter game against the Utah Jazz on ESPN. And it was goaltending. Rudy Gobert goaltended the play, and they didn't call it. And that would have tied the game, and they completely missed a blatant call. And then what their explanation is to the players is that we didn't see it. All three referees said it wasn't goaltending. And obviously the play is not reviewable because I believe since the call was not made, they can't review it. So it kind of really it made a lot of people angry, made a lot of people frustrated. Obviously, Damian Lillard was very frustrated after the game about it. I think this doesn't help the NBA because obviously the NBA officials have been under a lot of scrutiny for these last few years because of a lot of calls that have been missed that we consider blatant, or we consider, how do you miss something like that? And it just makes you kind of, it's like, what's making them not see these things that you think they would see? Kind of like that. So I think it's one of the most interesting situations, I think, trying to figure out the situation. Obviously, we know a couple of misblown calls. We remember the Kevin Durant call when they played, I believe, Houston, where he was clearly out of bounds, like he was in the paint out of bounds, and somehow they didn't see that call. And then there's others, missing, obvious fouls. It's honestly, I honestly feel like, I feel like this. I feel like referees, they try so hard not to want to be in the conclusion of the game or be a part of the end of the game. Like, they don't want to be the reason how or why a game ends a certain way. But the problem is with that theory and that perception is, the issue with it is, when they do that, they're now putting themselves in a position where they have basically, they're swallowing the whistle when there is an obvious call that needs to be made. If it's an obvious foul, call it. If it's an obvious goaltend, call it. If it's an obvious, something, call it. Don't swallow it because, the game's over. Like, I really feel like referees will swallow the whistle because they don't want to, I guess, quote unquote, impact the end of the game. But the only problem with that is clearly you're missing calls. And also, I think when you miss calls, players start to, talk about you in terms of before games, and your referee crew is like, they don't call stuff like this. They like to swallow the whistle in these positions. Things like that. It's a very frustrating situation, honestly, because you feel like we're going out here playing our hardest. And all we want y'all to do is, it's okay if it's a tick-tack, bang-bang call. But if it's something obvious where everybody in the arena saw it, and y'all are supposed to be the professionals on the court seeing it, it's a little questionable, and it makes you question the referees, and it makes you question who they have doing this, because you're questioning how do you miss a call like that. Even Utah after the game said it was a goaltend, but, oh well. Because obviously I feel like as a player, you don't want to win that way. You want to win where you beat them straight up. You don't want to beat a team thinking, well, we got this call, and this call was the wrong call, and that's the reason why we won the game. I feel like as a competitor, you never want that for yourself. And I think that's what makes it such a frustrating situation. I feel like, back in the day, I feel like with referee calls, I think referees cared more about getting the call right. Where now I feel like a lot of referees just do what the rule book says to appease the league. And so the league is kind of the reason why these calls have been made. Because everybody has to follow the rules instead of using common sense. Like, I feel like one thing you can never take out of anything, in my opinion, in life is common sense. Like at your job, you want your bosses to use common sense, not by the book, common sense. If my employer is sick, that can hurt his production, I need to send him home. Where other employers would just be like, okay, you're sick, and you know what I'm saying? Obviously, that's also an example of just a bad boss, but common sense. You like it's like, if you're a college student and you get into a car accident and your professor's like, well, you're still gonna get a 0 for the class or a 0 for this test. Going good and well, if you got your car ruined, you wouldn't even have made it to class and you might have canceled it. So why is it if I'm in the same scenario, it's not the same thing? I think it's one of those things with referees where the transparency needs to be there. I mean, you see it even in the technical fouls and injections. Back in the day, I feel like referees are more like, I know players, I know who's calm, who's loud, who gets into it. I know if he never gets mad about this, and then I make a call and he's furious, well, maybe something I did miss. Transparency, admitting I might have missed something there. Where a lot of the referees now, I watch basketball, and even if they miss a blatant call, they try to act like they're stolen, like it doesn't affect me, it doesn't matter, I don't care what you say. And it honestly, it makes them come off very disrespectful, probably to players, and etc. Going into the future of other things that potentially can. And referees I feel like now too, they just act like it's almost like they act like it's not our fault that we missed something. But it is, because that's your job, not to miss it. Like, listen, you're never going to be 100% accurate. You're going to have human error. But have human error on the ones that are close and bang, bang. Because then you can make an argument, you know what? They missed it, but it was close. Don't miss the calls that are obvious. That's what always gets referees killed. That's what gets them cussed out on the court. That's what gets people ejected. When you miss the obvious, crucial game calls like they did in the Portland and Utah game. Where that basically could have determined if Portland won or lost that game. Now, they ended up losing, obviously, because of it. But they could have won that game, potentially, if they had got it. And like Damian said after the game, we're in the playoff race. We're trying to make the playoffs, and we lost the game because the referees messed up. Now, luckily, the NBA did not fine Damian Lillard for this, even because he came out on Twitter and he was very blunt with how he felt about that call. Because, obviously the NBA releases their report on real games talking about, yes, this was a missed call. Yes, they missed this one. Yes, they got this one right. And Damian was just like, I don't want to hear all that, because you're supposed to be hiring some of the best that y'all have, and they're missing stuff that you think they shouldn't be missing. It's one of the most frustrating things, I think, as a fan too, because I feel like I'm getting robbed of my excitement and enjoyment for the game because you're missing the most obvious calls that you shouldn't be missing. So it's one of those types of things that I think the league has to definitely work on and improve in the future, because you don't want to turn your fan base off because you're missing obvious calls. You never want to do that. You never want to alienate your fan base. You never want to alienate your players. So, you got to do a better job. And that's why I feel like officiating is just bad nowadays, because they just miss things and then they tee you up quickly if you're frustrated about it. It's just like, it's almost like the referees don't care to have a relationship with the players. That's why that relationship with the players and the league sometimes isn't always the best. But coming up next segment, we got some news around Darren Collision, and will he or will he not return to the league? Trae Young leading the Hawks in double overtime win against the Knicks. Trae Young having another great game. I'll talk about how I think about the Hawks in the second half of the season. And Houston's 1-2 with their new small ball lineup after losing to Utah in a game-winning shot.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the horrible officiating call that happened in the Utah-Portland game, which cost Utah a game. Why officiating is so bad nowadays. I gave my thoughts and broke down why it's not been good for the last few years. There are multiple reasons why it's not been good for the last few years, and just all my thoughts on that. But now we're going to get to some news and notes around the league. And we're going to start with Darren Collision. Darren Collision was spotted at the LA Lakers LA-Houston game this past Thursday. He met with Jeannie Buss that day. Obviously, he's been contemplating coming back to the league after retiring because of his religious reasons. And now he's decided that he's not going to come back. He has decided to say, he said it was just not a right time, and he's going to sit out for the rest of the year. So obviously, Darren Collision could be back next year, but Lakers obviously, I think, look at this as a big blow, because a lot of people don't feel like they have another point guard outside of LeBron James on the roster. The only problem with that is just you would like to know we can take LeBron James off the floor, we can still get some type of production from the point guard position, because when you formulate a team and you structure a team, you want it to be where you can get some type of production from every position. You never want to feel like you have that position on the floor that gives you nothing. That's just a wasted spot almost in a way. And, obviously Rondo has not really played that well since returning from his injury. And a lot of people are just like, I don't like Rondo being our point. Now, obviously, I think the issue is a lot of people are looking at it in terms of playoff time, that could become an issue. Now, one thing we have to think about in the playoffs, you would think if they needed to, they could tell LeBron to play 42 to 44 minutes a game. Obviously, you could do that, and that would work since LeBron is your point guard. But obviously, it would just really be nice to know we could bring in somebody off the bench. LeBron could go to his natural position or another position and not have to always handle the ball. To sometimes take the load off of him somewhat sometimes. That's why Darren Collision not coming to LA was a very big blow to LA, because they really wanted him. They know what he brought to the table. They know what he would do for them. They know that he would help them tremendously in that regard, because Darren Collision can score. He can get you some buckets. He can run an offense. He's a starting point guard on half the teams in this league, and he would be backing up LeBron, and they would just be more and more confident in that second unit that comes in with Kyle Kuzma, and now they don't have that. So, it looks like they're going to have to stick with what they have. The Lakers are looking into some guys, it's to kind of fill that gap. But right now, we'll have to just see what they do for the current time being moving forward. We have some game news. The Hawks defeated the New York Knicks in double overtime. Obviously, now that game doesn't sound like anything you care about. But this is why Trae Young had another fantastic game. and he had 48 in the game. Another quality game from Trae Young. A lot of people still, debating if he should have been an all-star starter this year. And he continues to have big game after big game after big game. Trae's one of the best players, I think, in the league at his age, and I think he shows out there every day and shows it. The reason why I want to bring this up is that I think if you look at the 8th spot, it's very fluid in the East. There's about 5-6 teams still vying for the 8th spot as we're entering the official halfway point of the season, the All-Star break coming up this weekend. And a team that we wrote off because of how bad they started was the Atlanta Hawks to start the year. I'm not saying this as a homer. I'm saying this from an analytical standpoint and from a broadcaster's standpoint. The Hawks made very impressive trades at the deadline. They acquired their weakness, which was center. They did not have a good center. They didn't. They were not good defensively, and they didn't have a center who could defend or anything. And they picked up 2. Dwayne Dedmon, a 7-footer who can block shots and search the floor, and Clint Capella, an athletic big who can also block shots, and he's going to be great in pick and roll with Trae. And they basically solved their major weakness, which is the center position. So if you look at this Hawks team and you break it down, you have Trae, who's your superstar. Kevin Huerter is coming on. They've had a great January going into February so far as Kevin Huerter is hitting his stride. John Collins is a very consistent player for them, gives them around 18 a game. So your 3 top players are giving you pretty much what you kind of expect. You could get a little bit more out of Huerter, but you're getting what you pretty much expect from your 3 top young players. Then you drafted 2 rookies, Reddish and Hunter. Obviously, Hunter has been the most consistent out of the 2. He's never going to be a guy who gives you big points offensively, but he can give you points and play defense for you, and he'll only get better. Cam Reddish was the one who a lot of people were disappointed in because of how wild he played this year. And he was having these games where he would just miss badly and just not be a factor. And you thought with the talent that you think he would possess, he would be able to do it. But they're starting to play better. And then after that, and now, so if you look at this team with the trade, and then don't forget, they also traded for Jeff Teague to give him a third guard, a third scoring guard, a third guard who can run the offense. With Brandon Goodwin, a guy that not a lot of people know about, but has played very well for him in times that he has came, as I believe he'll be the backup point guard of the future. This Hawks team now looks like a pretty, again, I'm not saying championship by any stretch of the imagination. We all know that's not going to happen. But they look like a pretty good squad. They, when you have a young team, you have holes, but it's more sometimes, is it like it's a legitimate hole, or it's just they haven't developed and they're at that point kind of hole. And I think the Hawks have a lot of young talent clearly on this team. And with the additions of these centers, who are also under contract for a couple of years, so it's not like they're going to be free agents. Most of this team was going to be here. Now, obviously, there was a report last week that the Hawks don't want to pay John Collins, so he may be within his last 2 years of the Hawks potentially. Well, I'm sure they'll try to get the most he can out of him while he's here, because he'll demand about $20 million a year probably when he hits the market. But all I'm saying is, do not be surprised if the Atlanta Hawks somehow sneak into the 8th spot. They're currently, I think, 7 games out of the 8th spot right now. They're playing Orlando, who's in the 8th spot currently. So if they beat Orlando, they'll get obviously a game. And then if they can win their last game going into the All-Star break, and let's say Orlando loses again, now coming out of the All-Star break, they're only 5 games out of the 8th spot. And now with about 20 or so games left, I always say like this. I mean, obviously you have teams above you, but you got to win 5 more games than the team that's currently in that spot. So at least you're going to be over them. Now, if that's going to get you in, we'll have to see. But I think, obviously, with the team getting better, with Clint Capella coming back after the break, this Hawks team is a team that obviously, if Trae plays the way he plays, everybody plays up to the level of standard, the Hawks could, if they get on a winning streak, could potentially make a run and potentially sneak into that 8th spot of the playoffs. Now, obviously, I think everybody would think they would get swept by the Milwaukee Bucks, but we'll have to see. And also, I just want to talk about Houston real quick. Houston is now 1-2 with their small ball lineup. After that impressive win against the Lakers, they lost badly to the Phoenix Suns, and then they lost on a game-winning shot to the Utah Jazz. So this is obviously going to be scrutinized because they don't have a center, and they're going complete small ball, and everybody's just like, well, do you really think you can win not having a center, knowing that Anthony Davis and all those other guys, Rudy Gobert and DeAndre Ayton, are going to drop almost 30 on you a night because you can't guard them? Do you do you honestly think that you're going to sit here and always outscore them? Because one thing I always think about, they go off analytics with threes and layups. Teams just go off what their strength is. You know your highest percentage shot is going to be if you have a scoring big man, go to him against the Houston Rockets. That's analytics for you, but it's also smart basketball. Them, it's just analytic. Doesn't mean it's smart, just analytically. And I think that it's something that, obviously is going to be interesting going into the future, seeing what they do. They're going to have to play better, clearly, because obviously you don't want to keep this up where you're struggling a lot and you're struggling to, make things happen as Daryl Morey and this team really wants to be a championship team. But I just don't think with this lineup and with what they're trying to do, they're going to be able to do it, especially with the West and how stacked it is this year. I just don't see it for the Houston Rockets. But coming up next, we're going to get some more news and notes around the league. Kevin Durant says he's still going to do a burner account. The Raptors are currently on a 15-game winning streak. Are they the most underrated team in the league? And how good is the Boston Celtics really? All that.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment we talked about the Houston Rockets not really looking that good. 1-2 since unveiling their new small ball lineup after being blown out by the Phoenix Suns and then getting beat on a game-winning shot against the Utah Jazz. I also talked about how I think the Atlanta Hawks can probably make a run after the All-Star break with all the talent they've acquired and them getting healthy at the right time. And they're only being just about 5-6 games out of 8th place with 25 or so left to go in the season. And obviously that's probably exciting, I guess, for certain people. And then also Darren Collision deciding not to return to the NBA, saying he's going to sit out for the rest of the year. And obviously the Lakers having to go a new direction after that, knowing that they can't get the point guard that they were targeted. And maybe that's one of the main reasons why they didn't make a move at the deadline. So that's obviously going on right now. But we're going to get some news and notes around the league, obviously. We're going to talk about Kevin Durant. Now, Kevin Durant, obviously, recovering from his torn Achilles, has been doing some workouts, posting videos on IG and everything. But we also know Kevin Durant is also not afraid to clap back at people on social media. In a recent interview he did, he said that he's still going to use his burner account. Now, obviously, this makes people kind of be like, oh, brother. I honestly, you know what I think about burner accounts? I kind of understand. Because think about it. As a player, you're taking all this heat. People trying to get in your head, know why you did this, why you ain't do that, why you played bad, why this happened, and all that. With a burner account, players can kind of, without, obviously, because if you did it on your account, you'd probably be scrutinized for it, can kind of get out their thoughts and opinions on certain situations without being known, anonymously being able to say certain things and be like, oh, well, I think that he's actually a great player. I mean, obviously, it can get that corny, but it's like I kind of understand why Kevin does it. I understand. Kevin probably sees all that talk about him on social media and knows he can't always clap back on his account. So he wants to have another account he can kind of talk about. I mean, listen, you just have some people out there who like trolling. Kevin Durant, to me, he looks like he likes to troll. He's a troller. He wants to be able to get in discussions because obviously if he gets into the discussion now, everybody's going to direct everything towards him where he wants to just be amongst the people. And it's like, I'll just be a troll. I'll just be someone who says whatever. And it always makes you wonder when those little accounts with those accounts that only have a lot of followers and names, it's just like, is this, like, you don't know who's behind the account. Is it potentially your favorite NBA player tweeting you back? I mean, you don't ever know. Kind of makes you kind of wonder. Makes people sit here and think, that sounds like something Kevin Durant would say. I wonder if that's his account. It's really funny. But, I mean, obviously, you probably don't want your star player doing this in retrospect because, if you get caught again, and let's say you made a comment that's very aggressive, it can make you look bad. Obviously, there was the comments he made about he felt like Oklahoma City had a bunch of athletes but not a lot of skilled players, and that's why it was kind of difficult for him to stay there, where at Golden State he had skilled guys and not just athletes, which made it better for him because he felt like I have guys with similar skill sets around me instead of me being the only guy who can do everything and everybody just does a particular thing well. So, I mean, it's one of those things with Kevin Durant. Like I said, we just wish him a speedy recovery from his torn Achilles, but obviously, like I said, he always has something big to say about something, and that's just who Kevin Durant is, and I think we just got to accept that's his personality, and this is how Kevin Durant's going to continue to be moving forward. You can't really hate him for it. That's what I say. At least he's authentic and he's real with you and he's honest. That's what I say. You should want that from out of your players. But now we're going to talk about the Toronto Raptors, who are currently on a 15-game winning streak. Toronto has played absolutely fantastic. They're healthy, and they're playing great basketball. And I feel like they're the most underrated team in the league because nobody – it's kind of weird. I don't know if people thought Toronto was going to collapse without Kawhi, but you just didn't expect them to be this good. You wouldn't expect a team that didn't have their quote-unquote best player to just ever go into the next year and win 15 straight. And I think that's what makes this situation so interesting. The Raptors have everything you'd want. Nick Nurse is an absolutely fantastic head coach. Absolutely fantastic. And he shows that on a day-to-day basis. He goes out there every day and he coaches his butt off. They have, I believe, 6 players or 7 players who average 10 points or more, which clearly means every player who gets on the floor in Toronto feels like they contribute to this team. They feel like they are a reason why this team wins every night. And it's not just, it's on Kawhi, it's on Siakam, it's on Kyle Lowry. It's like, no, everybody feels like they play a part in their success. They're an excellent defensive team, and they're a very good offensive team. Like a lot of people forget about during the playoff run, they didn't have OG Anunoby. He was a very good role player for them during the regular season. He got hurt going into the playoffs with an emergency appendix. And I think people forget, like, he's a good player. He's played well since he's came back this year. They have depth. They have length. They can shoot. They have 2 point guards who can beat you on any night. Siakam has turned into a star. Ibaka's a very solid power forward. Right now, Marc Gasol is not even healthy. Marc Gasol is hurt right now. So just imagine when he gets back. Like, a lot of people are kind of starting to sit here and think, could Toronto upset Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference Finals? How far can they go? Could they make it back to the NBA championship? There's a lot of questions and excitement around Toronto because you can honestly make the argument outside of Milwaukee, they have looked like the second best team in the Eastern Conference. The second best by far. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens moving into the future because they're a team that I think a lot of people just, again, you just kind of write them off because it's Toronto. Like, I think when you're a big team like the Lakers, you're always going to be thinking, if we make this move, championship. We're always going to have a chance. We have LeBron, AD, Toronto, they could have a star. They could have a really good put-together roster, and they kind of feel like, well, I mean, they could be good. They could be decent. They could play well. They're solid. I don't think they're going to do anything in the playoffs. And it's just like, I don't know why we have that perception of them. Toronto is one of the most complete teams, I think, in the NBA, even without Kawhi. And I think they deserve more credit and recognition than they've gotten. And this 15-game winning streak is making you pay attention to these guys and realistically look at them and say, listen, this team is for real. And it would be kind of an interesting spinals if Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers got there and Toronto got there. I think that would create a lot of storyline, a lot of intrigue in the NBA. And lastly, I want to talk about the third best team, I think, in the Eastern Conference, the Boston Celtics. I've been paying attention to a lot of their games recently, and I watched them, and honestly, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum just look so different to me. They look so much better. They look like they're perennial stars, if not stars already. They're going to be an extremely tough team to beat in the playoffs, especially with Kemba. They have length, they have shooting. I think both of those guys have really freshened up their game. You honestly look at this team when you look and you have a very positive outlook. I want to say, I feel like there's a very positive outlook on this team, and I think it's extremely impressive, very impressive in my personal opinion. Boston is a team that again will be a tough out. Remember something too. Very, very high possibility, unless Toronto and Boston end up being the 2 and 3 seeds, that they'll meet Milwaukee in the semifinals, and I think, those are the series that you would think right now, if anybody was going to beat them, it would be one of those guys. Because they play extremely well. They play together. Great. They're great coached by, Brad Stevens. They play defense. They have a lot of new pieces they've been using this year that's been working for them. And, they just look like one of the better teams in all of the NBA. Boston is definitely a team that you definitely do not want to sleep on. And we haven't even mentioned Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward, we know how good Gordon Hayward can be. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how good Boston really is at the end of the day, in my personal opinion. But coming up next, we're going to talk about Minnesota snapping a 13-game losing skid by blowing out the LA Clippers. The Lakers are eyeing 2 players, J.R. Smith and Dion Waiters. I'll give you my thoughts on that. And could Andrew Wiggins just be a piece for the Golden State Warriors in acquiring a Giannis? Stay tuned for my opinion and more on that right here on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about a lot of different things around the league happening. Obviously, we talked about Kevin Durant still doing his burner account. What were my thoughts on that? We talked about the Raptors on a 13-game winning streak. Are they the best team that nobody talks about? The most underrated team in the NBA? I think personally they are, because nobody talks about Toronto. And a lot of people feel like Toronto was going to kind of slowly fall off. And I don't feel like that's honestly, you should have thought that. And obviously, I also talked about how good Boston really is. Boston is a team to me that, again, there's also, I feel like in the Eastern Conference in general, you don't get the same credit and recognition that a Western Conference team gets. But they're just as quality as the Western Conference teams, in my opinion. And it's going to be very interesting to see who can maybe actually end up dethroning the Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference. So back to some news. Minnesota has not won a game in a month. They were on a 13-game losing skid. And they came back against the LA Lakers. Obviously, this is after DeAndre Russell was traded. He didn't play in the game with a thigh contusion, I believe. And they blew them out. They completely annihilated the LA Clippers. They blew them out. They broke a record for threes in franchise history. It was just a great. It was almost kind of weird, like wow. You make a trade, the guy you traded for didn't even come, but then y'all have y'all best performance. Now, obviously, D'Angelo Russell is expected to make his debut against the Toronto Raptors, but against the LA Clippers, 142-115, it was just a great, game all around. They shot 55% from field goal percentage. They shot 59% from three, 26 of 44. If a team shoots 26 of 44 from three, you're losing. That's why they almost had 150 points in the game. Only turned it over 12 times, had 39 assists. Just honestly, they played excellent. And it was a very even effort. Towns only had 22 points in the game. He was the third leading scorer. Beasley, who they just got from the Denver Nuggets, he's getting a chance to play. He got 23 and 10. McLaughlin, he had 24. Gomez, he had 14. Dorley, he had 15. Everybody shot estimated at least 2 threes in this game at a very high clip. I mean, honestly, you look at this game, congratulations to Minnesota, because like I said, they were looking down in dumps. Obviously, Minnesota had that good start to the year, then fell off, and then they had a 13-game winning streak, and it just looked like the mountain was falling on them, and it was just kind of like, what happened to Minnesota? What caused this rapid decline, I guess you can say? And, they finally bounced back, and now they're back in shape, and they're back in a good spot right now. Obviously, we'll have to see what this team looks like with D'Angelo Russell around, but, we'll have to see what happens going into the future and seeing, things that potentially could happen and come out of this development with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, obviously, the Lakers, I told you earlier, were just not able to get Darren Collision as Darren Collision decided not to come back to the NBA. But it doesn't mean they're not looking for guys. The Lakers are currently looking into acquiring J.R. Smith or Dion Waiters, with Dion Waiters having preliminary discussions with him. Because I think they know they need some type of playmaking guard, some type of scoring guard. J.R. is more of a spot-up three-point for LeBron. Dion Waiters is more of a guy who can create his own shot, and he can make plays offensively. He's one of the more complete offensive playmakers out there currently on the market. And I think Dion Waiters, if they were able to pick him up, would be a great addition to the team. Because Dion Waiters can play some point if needed, but he is known mainly as a scoring guard. Dion Waiters, before all the issues in Miami, was really that guy. Before his injuries and issues, he was that guy in Miami. With Wayne, they were both a great scoring duo. And now he hasn't really been able to showcase it the last 2 years because of injuries and issues within the Miami Heat organization. So if they pick him up, I think that's going to really put the Lakers where they want to go, which they wanted a scoring guard. They were able to pick up a scoring guard. They acquired a scoring guard. And I think that's going to help them long term because that's what they know they need going into the playoffs. And then he can crack the rotation when the playoffs come around. And, it's like, okay, we got somebody now who can give LeBron a break, who can give. So maybe we don't have to play him 44 minutes. You're still going to probably play LeBron 40 plus minutes because it's the playoffs, but maybe you can play him just at max 40 minutes. You can give him some small little breast breaks here and there. It's one of those types of things. So I think it's something that I think is very impressive. I think it's something that's very cool. I think it's something that's very exciting. If I am a Lakers fan, potentially, because obviously I see a lot of things. A lot of people have kind of hopped off the Rajon Rondo train. They feel like he is a liability, not an asset, and they would like to not see him play the minutes he plays. So if they can pick up Dion Waiters, then I feel like some Laker fans will have their wish. Now, I do say, y'all forget something. Rondo becomes a different player in the playoffs, but I guess people are like, we don't want to wait for the playoffs for Rondo to be good. If he can't be good in the regular season, we don't want him. So we'll have to see, especially because you want to feel confident that he's going to turn it on by showing or seeing it during the season. With Dion Waiters, Dion Waiters plays the game hard every game, and he's going to come out there every game and put his best foot forward and try to be the best player on the floor, even if he's not. Because Dion Waiters has that confidence in himself that he could be the best player on the floor on any given night, even with LeBron and Anthony Davis on the floor at the same time with them. So it's going to be definitely something that's going to be interesting to keep up with and see about in the future. And we'll have to see what the Lakers actually end up doing in that position when they have the ability to acquire a guy like, Dion or JR. You'll see the direction of the team, when you see whoever they sign. I think they're going to pick somebody up, but we just got to see who they actually decide to actually go ahead and actually bring into the roster and put into that position where they're just like, either you're going to be a 3-and-D if you get JR, or we're getting more of a playmaking guard if we get Dion. So we'll have to see what happens. And then lastly, obviously the Golden State Warriors traded for Andrew Wiggins. I think it's a good move. I think that, you have to see how I've said this. If he can't work with Clay and Steph, then there's no hope. But there was a couple of reports coming out that maybe this could be a bigger haul for them than what maybe people think. Maybe this is just a piece they can use to get Giannis. Now, obviously, I think it's unlikely to me that Giannis is going to be traded ever, because the only way that would happen is Giannis would have to have already made it known that he's not coming back. So I feel like also making the trade that they made, this is also, if they can't get Giannis, they still have a good player in that spot, and they can still compete in that spot with Clay and Steph. And they still feel like they have a very formidable roster in their opinion. So I think that's going to be kind of the thing that I see from this. Because the package they were thinking about that some people said was maybe getting a guy like Andrew Wiggins in the lottery pick that you're going to get this year because of how bad the Golden State Warriors record is, and then maybe seeing if that's enough to entice the Bucks to make that trade. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think if anything happens, it's going to be through free agency if Giannis leaves the Milwaukee Bucks. But I think it's smart on their part to at least have that option available to them, because you never know. I always feel like Golden State and the way they're run, they always want to be one step ahead of the curve. They always want to be in position just in case something happens to be able to capitalize on it. They're not a team that's just like, oh, it's unlikely, we're not going to worry about it, and then it happens, and then it's like, oh, snap, we got to do something. They kind of want to already be in position, so if something does change, they're already prepared for that change, and then they can make the adjustments and stuff needed to make something happen to help benefit the team into the long-term future. Because Golden State's a very smart organization, and they've shown that clearly. So, that's something you can't take away from them, and, it's something that you might want to keep an eye on next year potentially. But coming up next, here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast, we're going to talk about college basketball scores from this past weekend. I'm going to talk to you about some of the big results and big games. We're also going to talk about the new AP poll that was released. Obviously, I have to give you the new AP poll, see if any new teams jumped into the top 10, fell out, any upsets that caused some shakeup in the AP 2025. So stay tuned for that and more here on the podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about many different things. Really, just main three things, really. We talked about Minnesota snapping their 13-game losing streak. Obviously, that was a big deal out there in Minnesota. We also talked about the Lakers eyeing Dion Waiters. And we also talked about Andrew Wiggins could just be a piece that Golden State might be willing to dangle out there for Giannis, potentially. If maybe Giannis became disgruntled and wanted to leave the Milwaukee Bucks, they already kind of have something they can use to potentially pry him away from the Milwaukee Bucks. As, they always like to stay to be one step ahead of everybody in the NBA, so they can always be on top of it and get the best players that they potentially and possibly could. So there's that. Now we're going to get to some college basketball talk, obviously. You're going to get into the college basketball talk. Going to talk about some scores from this past weekend, big games, big upsets. Obviously, there's an upset every week in college basketball. That's why we love the game of college basketball. So we're going to go ahead and start off with upset UCLA. I'm sorry, not that game. We're going to start with this game. Maryland and Illinois, 5-20. Maryland was able to come out on top 75-66. They were able to beat their Fighting Illini. Obviously, this helps Maryland stay very effective and continue to be one of the better teams in the conference. Maryland's a team, obviously, you got to look out for when the tournament comes around, and you got to make sure that you don't sleep on them. I definitely, if my bracket, would at least get them to the 6-16. Next, UCLA versus Arizona. UCLA gets the upset, beating Arizona 65-52. Arizona's the number 23 team in the country. Bruins, this is a very key win for resume speaking. Being a ranked team, obviously, that's big for them. Obviously, Bruins are only 13-11 on the season, not having the season they maybe expected, but they're coming out there and, getting wins like this gives them a small chance, maybe if they're on the bubble team, to maybe get in to the NCAA tournament. We got Oregon State, who upset at Oregon this past weekend. Oregon State 63, Oregon 53. Obviously, another big game for the Beavers, another upset they've accomplished. This is obviously a big time for them. So, it's one of those things where in the second half, really, Oregon State really just took over. They just completely outplayed them. They completely outmatched them, and it showed. And that's why Oregon lost. Because Oregon has lost to a lot of teams this year that you can maybe say they shouldn't have lost to. So, definitely something that it looks like a consistency issue. And obviously, if you're an inconsistent team, you're going to be eliminated quickly when the tournament comes around. Obviously, we got to talk about San Diego State beating Air Force 89-74, remaining undefeated, continuing their quest one step closer to for an undefeated regular season, essentially getting maybe a top seed in the NCAA tournament, at best a 2 seed, in my opinion. So that's obviously big for them to be able to come out with that victory. Duke and UNC had one of the best games ever in their rivalry, obviously, as Duke hits a game-winning buzzer shot to beat UNC. Trae Jones, just great stuff. A great game, overtime game. Everybody wondered about this game. Everybody asked the question, does it matter that UNC's not that good? And they showed why. Because when these two teams play, in these type of rivalry games, these are the type of games they're always going to be great. They're always going to be clutch. They're always going to be clutch. They're always going to be great, very high-level ball games. Regardless of record, both teams are going to put it all on the line. Because even if UNC doesn't make the tournament, they're like, hey, at least we beat Duke. At least we were able to beat those guys. And for some people, that is okay. That is something that they're looking for. That is something they accept. And that's something they would take and say, hey, that's one thing we can say we got out of this season. So that's obviously big for them. Seton Hall upsetted Villanova this past weekend. I mean, is it really an upset? Seton Hall's 12th, Villanova's 10th, but obviously by ranking it's an upset, 70-64. Obviously a big win for them to come out with that victory and play well in that position. They do a lot of good things well, and I think it just shows. Seton Hall is one of the more underrated teams, I think, also during the season. They've beaten a lot of quality teams, which is why they're even at this point right now. And it just shows, and being another quality team in Villanova. Villanova's also been on the edge of some upsets recently, so they haven't been playing particularly their best basketball recently. Louisville obviously coming out with a victory over the defending champion, Virginia. Virginia started the season pretty good, kind of fell off. I mean, they still have a good record. They can still make the tournament. They're looking more and more like you're kind of wondering if they can be that team that was like last year, because obviously they lost a lot of talent from last year's team. Obviously, DeAndre Hunter, who's currently on the Hawks right now, and other guys they've lost. Trying to be better than they were. Dayton was able to beat St. Louis 71-65. Obviously, another good win for Dayton. Just trying to go out there and continue to improve their resume every week, every game. Oklahoma upset at West Virginia this past week, 13th-ranked Virginia, 69-54. Oklahoma just comes out there and plays great basketball. And, this is going to help them. They're 15-8 on the year, so this is definitely a game that will help them if they're on the bubble, and also potentially getting maybe an at-large bid. So definitely something that was big for them. We'll have to see. West Virginia continues to come out there, ball, and play well every game, and you can't take that away from them. Auburn and LSU had a classic in overtime. Auburn able to win 91-90. Just another great game. And honestly, LSU collapsed down the stretch. They have that turnover late to cut it to 1. And then they got another shot to win it. And, it's just one of those things where Auburn is definitely a team. They have a lot of talent. Dowdy is one of the best players in the country, one of the best scoring players in the country too, and it shows on a day-to-day basis. It's one of those things that you can obviously see there's some things that need to be improved. There's some things in talent that needs to be changed. And, they're really doing what they got to do out there to be at a high level. And, obviously LSU, they were actually the top team in conference record in the SEC this week, but obviously losing a tied game now. So, those types of things happen, but, continuing on. But also, Michigan gets an upset over Michigan State, 77-68. Michigan State, the 15th best team in the country. Obviously, very big upset for them. It helps them just, every upset's very important for every team because it helps them continue to look good, improve their resume, helps them moving forward. Obviously, in the last upset is Marquette beating number 16 Butler 76-57 in a blowout. Marquette, this is like the third blowout I think they've had the last 3 weeks, and against good teams. Marquette is definitely a team that has definitely solidified themselves as one of the best teams in the country in big games. They always play well. They always play top. They always play the best basketball they play every day, and that's why they're always in the running, and they're always in it late, and that's what just makes them such a great team. So now we're going to get into the new AP 25 poll. We're going to obviously talk about the top 10. That's what we talk about here. So number 1 obviously is Baylor. Baylor for the third week in a row is the number 1 team. Still playing good basketball. Only 1 loss this year. Looking like one of the best teams in college basketball right now. Number 2, Gonzaga, 25-1. Playing, obviously, the game, we like to say their conference is the toughest in the world. So if they get past their non-conference, they're pretty much solidified at number 1 spot probably. Kansas, number 3 now, 20-3 on the year. Bouncing back, obviously, after that big fight that brought Kansas State and the suspension, still playing at a high level, winning games. Obviously, San Diego State at number 4, undefeated, 24-0 right now in the season. Louisville at number 5, 21-3. Obviously, one of the best ACT teams and the highest ranked ACT team right now. Dayton is number 6 at 21-2. Obviously, a very dominant team. Number 7 is the Duke Blue Devils at 20-3. Florida State, 20-3 also. Obviously, those two teams I think are going to be battling with Louisville for that top spot coming out of the ACC. It's going to be interesting ACC tournament to see those teams play each other. Number 9, Maryland. They cracked the top 10, 19-4 on the year. And to finish out the top 10, Seton Hall, 18-5, obviously, coming off a big victory this past weekend against Villanova. You would think they would be able to crack the top 10, but Auburn's right behind them at number 11 at 21-2. So definitely something to look at and check out. But coming up next, we're going to talk about Bleacher Report's top power rankings, and we're also going to talk Team USA preliminary roster that was released today. All that here and more on the podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Right here in a second, we're going to talk about the preliminary finalists for the 44 guys who were finalists for the 2020 Tokyo Olympic roster. Obviously, if you heard the news, Trae Young was hurt that he didn't make this roster. And if you look at the roster, you kind of feel like he's better than some of these players. So you would be kind of surprised that he wasn't even a finalist in this. So, but I think it's okay. I think Trae's going to make it there eventually. Just not now, but he'll be on the Olympic team in the future. I'm sure of it. But yes, they brought out their preliminary roster finalists. Obviously, there's a lot of guys on this roster. LeBron says there's a chance he might play in the game. He thinks that, he might. There's been this consensus among the league that there is this perception of some of the top players are starting to kind of maybe will be willing to play another Olympics. The reason why usually the top players don't play is obviously what happened to Paul George a couple of years ago, where he broke his leg in a warm-up game. And obviously that made star players realize, like, hey, this is still basketball. We're still playing. We can still get hurt, and then it kills our chances in the regular season for our teams to be good. So is it really smart for me to play? Now, I think obviously when you're a new player, you play because you've never done it. But I feel like once you've done it and you're a star player, you're kind of just like, I don't really need to anymore. Like when you're young, you can still go to the Olympics and play. When you're like in your prime years, you kind of feel like, do I really need to play? Do I really want to play? I mean, you're going to go to all the camps and everything, but it's like when it actually gets down to that finalist selection, you're kind of just like, I mean, we saw what happened in the basketball FIFA tournament. A lot of players dropped out because they just felt like, I'm trying to focus on trying to be better on my team. Where a lot of people just really thought like they didn't feel like it was worth, like, this is basketball, doesn't mean anything. I mean, well, yeah, it's great that we win the FIFA World Basketball Championship, but to a lot of players that doesn't mean a lot because everybody knows America, in terms of pure talent, has the best players. It's just for them, they don't need to win a tournament to make somebody believe that. Even for the Olympics, I mean, some players are more willing to kind of do the Olympics because it's like you're playing for your country, the honor of playing in the Olympics. That's why you have people who will kind of be like, okay, well, I might do that one. Now, the FIFA basketball tournament, though, I feel like you'll never get another star player playing that one because that really doesn't mean anything. Olympics has some meaning to it because you're playing for your country. You could get a gold medal. It'd be nice to say, I won a gold medal. You know what I'm saying? Because that's something nobody can ever take away from you. And so that's something that I think that obviously, when you're a player trying to make these decisions, that's something that you look into is how important is it for me to play in the Olympics, for me to play in the FIFA World Tournament, to go to these camps. I mean, honestly, it's been a tradition through most of NBA that all the top players go to these camps because this is also one of the few times that the top players in the game, outside of the All-Star game, can all play together and just have fun and just, it's like I call it loose basketball. You're not under this playoff pressure, stress, scrutiny. It's kind of just like you play and you have fun and you enjoy each other's company. It's kind of a bonding situation while also coming together for a common goal like a gold medal if you play in the Olympics. So I think that's something that I think makes it very impressive to me, makes it very cool, makes it very exciting if I'm them to do the opportunity to potentially play in a league like that and to potentially do what we got to do in regards to that. So I think, obviously we'll have to see who actually ends up deciding to play this summer at the Olympics. Because, yes, people, y'all forget the Olympics is this year. So it's going to be something probably, because it's something that happens over the summer. So obviously I feel like players who may play late into the playoffs might not do it because it's like, I want to give myself more time off from basketball. Players who might get eliminated sooner, or players that did make the playoffs, I feel like are more likely to go ahead and play on the team. It honestly just depends on how your body probably is feeling at that time and how you feel about the situation. I feel like obviously if more of the top players play, top players will, they're going to play with top players. But if you see a lot of top players dropping out, you might see a top player just like, I'm not going to go. So it really just depends. But now we're going to get into Bleacher Report top power rankings. We're going to talk about the top 10 teams, my thoughts on all of them. And we're going to start with the number 10 team, the Utah Jazz. Obviously, Utah, they've had a pretty great week. They beat Houston on the game winner. Obviously, they beat Portland on a very controversial play. I think they're playing some of their best basketball. I think Mike Conley's finally coming on. He's playing some of his best basketball. And I think that Utah is a very interesting team. They're very well coached. You feel like they have all the potential in the world to be a top team, potentially. Because they're a great and solid defensive team. They added shooting. Donovan Mitchell's their star. You kind of just say, but at the end of the day, you're kind of just like, they'll go as far as Donovan Mitchell takes them. So you're going to have to kind of see what happens with that. Number 9, the Miami Heat. Obviously, Miami's played one of the better games. Miami's a very good team. Obviously, we'll have to see what happens. Obviously, they made trades. They added Jay Crowder. They added Andre Iguodala after his last week's trade deadline. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that rotation because obviously adding those players to the rotation with the rotation they had, obviously a lot of their younger players were able to get minutes. Now are those minutes going to be shrinked from those younger players? Are they not going to have as much opportunity to play? Are they not going to be able to, do what they want to do? Obviously, Miami was probably one of the better offensive teams with those guys on the floor. They added 2 guys who are known more for their defense. So you kind of wonder about that and see how that's going to potentially work out on the court when it gets down to, you making those late game adjustments. Which kind of unit do you want out there? Do you trust certain players out in certain situations? Things like that. Number 8, the Houston Rockets, obviously. It's kind of funny that they've made this short ball offense, but they are a small ball team. They're going to be extremely fun to watch. It's going to be fun to watch these guys play. It's going to be fun to see what happens with the Houston Rockets this year. Definitely, probably what you would consider the funnest team in the NBA to watch on a daily basis. Oklahoma City is number 7, obviously one of the most surprising teams, obviously, in the league with what Chris Paul has done, and Dino Gallinari, and Dennis Schroeder, and everybody. This team looks just so great on paper. They have they're not a championship threat, but they should be able, in terms of long term, be very good long term, and maybe can turn some short term investments into some long term benefits. They have assets. Obviously, they got a boatload of draft picks from the Clippers. They have plenty of things they can do to, remain as one of the better teams in the conference for years to come. Obviously, the Clippers, 6 on this list. Obviously, they've been up and down. They got blown out by Timberwolves, but they came back and blew out Cleveland. This has pretty much been the season of the Clippers, especially with Kawhi Low managing. It's just like one day they can look like the most dominant team. The next day they look like they're vulnerable. But then, Paul George was rested or Kawhi was rested. So it's just kind of like Number 5, Boston Celtics. Boston Celtics are always coming out there every day, being who they are. They know what they are good at. They know what their strengths and weaknesses is, and they play to that strengths and weakness. And that's why they're always successfully and always efficient on the floor at all times. And Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown making that jump has been extremely important for them and their success long term. Number 4, the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, Denver is one of the better teams in the league. Denver is a very good team. Denver has a lot of potential. They have so much talent. They have so much good talent. You may feel like a lot of that talent's around the same, but they just have a lot of talent nonetheless. Obviously, we talked about Toronto Raptors, the third on this list. Toronto, they're very well coached. 15-game winning streak. You can't deny what they've done. The defending champs look amazing. Number 2, the Los Angeles Lakers. They've played very well. They lost Houston. Obviously, LeBron with that highlight, beautiful dunk. Listen, the Lakers are going to be there at the end, I think, with the Clippers. And obviously, the end of this list, Milwaukee Bucks are number 1. Milwaukee is best record in the league by far, and one of the most dominant teams in the NBA all this season, like they were last season. But that's it here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast, here on the GSMC Podcast Network. Please don't forget to look at us and follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you and have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.